Hey there, thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode of The Deliberate Zoomer, hosted by myself, Silas Maynor, and my good friend, Michael Simonton. We hope you enjoyed today's episode.
Who?
And we're back. Welcome to the show, everybody. Thanks for returning to hear Michael and I talk today. Today, we are still talking about living your 20s with intention. So choosing who you want to be and living and making sure you choose all of the aspects of your life well so that by the end of your 20s, you're set in a good trajectory for the rest of your life. Today, as mentioned before, we will be talking about honesty and transparency. So just to be honest and transparent with you, this is going to be a shorter episode. It's a little bit of a lighter topic, but we still wanted to give it an entire episode to itself because it is very important as we feel. So I guess, just to kind of start things off here, the whole reason I think that this really, really deserves its own episode is because it can be a guiding factor, right, for your life. And it really helps to just be and live a life that you can look back at the end of your life and be like, I'm happy with that, right? You don't want to live a life and do things that you're not proud of, right? As one speech that I heard from Matthew McConaughey on YouTube, he said it was great. I love, by the way, if you haven't watched some of his motivational speeches, I highly recommend it. He's a really great guy to hear that stuff. But he talked about don't leave breadcrumbs behind you, right? Don't do things that you look over your shoulder and be like, oh shit, why did I do that? I'm not happy about that. So that's kind of the main focus here. I guess what are your kind of initial thoughts specifically on career growth with honesty and some of those areas?
So for career growth with honesty, honestly, that's how you should approach it. Because so you start a job, you've got your job, everything was kind of like working out, but you're not honest with your boss, and you're not honest about your goals and where you want to be and how happy you are there. And what does that look like? Well, if you're dishonest, you are being in this instance, then you're not going to be optimizing for your future. You're not going to be having that wholesome, candid relationship that you probably should be having. And so that's very bad. What you want to do is you want to be honest and upfront. You want to be, of course, there are lines and you don't want to cross those with the honesty, but you got to be clear about your goals and you have to be, candid. So be honest, let them know what you want to do, what you're after and stuff like that. And it will pan out because then, you find ways to align it with the company values. You find ways to align with the company goals and you get to work together. And that only happens once you're honest. And this goes with not just work, but this goes to life. In life, the side tangent, we'll probably get into this a little later, but in life, if you're not honest with yourself and with others, you're not doing the best. You're not doing your best. You're not being your best first self because you're leaving breadcrumbs behind you, for lack of a better term. You're just leaving stuff you're going to look over your shoulders for. And so you want to be honest. Plus, having been dishonest once or twice, it creates a lot of lie. As you start building up and you slowly start discrediting yourself and everyone around you, and trust is a huge factor, and that's only built off of honesty. So keep it honest.
I think one thing that, we see it in our TV shows, right? I'm a big fan of con artist TV shows, those type of movies. I just love those shows. My favorite one is Sneaky Pete. And I don't know if you've ever seen it on Amazon Prime, but point is it starts out, he's a con man. He's got to start out a lie, but the lie constantly gets more complicated. And the same is true in our lives. So many people live by these things. And as a result, they start to just deteriorate their quality of life. And before you know it, it's just a juggling act, right? And not to say that most people have this struggle, but everybody has to at first, the key factor here is being honest with yourself. And this goes back to, in a previous episode, talking about choosing your first job. What do you actually want? Choosing your goals. What are you searching for? What are the important areas to you? If you cannot be honest with yourself about these things, and let's be honest, it goes all the way to the beginning, right? Deciding and realizing that you are in charge of your life. That comes from an honesty with yourself of saying, in complete transparency, I am the one who has choice over my life. And you have to admit that. If you don't, then you're not going to get anywhere. So getting to that point where you can look at and say, all right, I have these issues. This is what I need to fix. But also, this is what I really want, right? I don't want to go to college. I want to be a musician, right? I don't care about making $100,000 a year. I just want to make 50. Like those things, those motivations, Simon Sinek would talk about it being, that's your why, that's your purpose. And they're going to be with you your whole life. So use that as one of the guiding factors when making your decisions and spending time trying to reflect on your life. I think just in general, another thing that we could talk about some here is, so throughout their 20s, this is brought up more in the book, The Defining Decade. I can't feel that I don't feel that I can speak to it as well, but she talks about relationships a lot and how so many people, for example, she uses the example of like, oh, I don't want to think about getting married till I'm 30, but then everybody wants some kids still, or most people. And she's like, then these women that she talks to said they don't realize it until it's very far along that they're really going to have a hard time having kids because they put it off so long. So I guess to kind of piggyback off of that would be, if you understand what your motivations are in the long term, and this we've talked about setting your goals, we'll talk about starting with the end in mind at the end. And if you can do that, that's going to really help guide you in your decisions. And then with your relationships specifically, does that person that you're hanging out with or you're dating, does that person align with what you want for your life? Does that person, do you see yourself working out with them? For me specifically, and this is something that I've struggled with a lot, is really trying to decide like early on in the relationship is like, will this work? Do I think that it's worth continuing to put this effort in, because it's a lot of effort. And if you really have your gut feeling that just says it's not going to work, then should you put more effort into it? And maybe this is more of a question for you to get some feedback from you, but I think it's very important to just be quite transparent about everything, because you cannot run from yourself. If you try to run from yourself, you're going to be running your whole life, and you're never going to achieve any type of happiness and peace.
Absolutely. And with that in mind, one objection that people have to being honest sometimes is the conflict, the friction that it can create. And that's something that really should be talked about, because, for instance, with relationships, being honest might cause some short-term friction. It might cause discomfort. You might not have the greatest night of your life when you're sitting there on a date and you're thinking through and you're like, oh, well, I don't know if I can see this going anywhere, but I'm going to, be honest with you and tell you that it's going to suck. Yeah, it does sometimes. But what's more important than that is you're building and you're developing and you're practicing character. You're being honest with yourself. You're being honest with them. And that is going to build a reputation for you. It's also going to build a pattern. You're going to build a habit of being honest. And that's good, because, relationships are built off of trust, but a lot of that trust is going to come from your character. And by being dishonest, you basically, I can't think of any better way to just destroy all of your character, your reputation, your rapport, than just lying to someone. So yes, it's difficult sometimes. And sometimes it's not necessarily appropriate, when you're at your grandma's funeral and someone's outfit just doesn't look great and they're like, oh, why do you think? You're like, you don't tell them that it's probably a poor choice. You're like, it looks good. You're just happy they're there. Because it's not what's important at the time. So not to tell white lies, but, so you want to tell the truth, or you at least just don't want to lie. So make sure, that's a Jordan Peterson thing, of course, but, make sure that you take into consideration the situation when you're being honest. Sometimes, for instance, to pull from Friends, if you're a Ted Mosby, you don't want to be honest with someone and tell them you want to end the relationship when you're out on a birthday dinner date. Like, that's not the time to do it. I'm sorry. It might be the first thing on your mind, but that's just not the time to do it. So, it comes with some tact, it comes with some practice, but the best thing to do is just to start being honest with yourself and with everyone in your life as soon as you can. And yeah, I think that's.
Yeah, one thing that is coming to mind right now is I haven't finished the book, but it's called The Advantage. Patrick Lencioni, really interesting Catholic writer who does business consulting. He talks about conflict, and this is why you mentioning conflict brought it up to me. Is in a business, these businesses that go on for a long time and they have underlying issues that get worse and worse and worse. They come from people trying to avoid conflict. Like they know it's wrong. They know that there's something wrong and they should bring it up, but they don't because they're afraid. So you have to be honest with yourself and honest with everybody around you. Like it might not be an internal conflict. It might be an external conflict where you have to say, if we continue at this rate, right, our sales force is going to leave us because the incentives aren't correctly aligned. So, we have to address those things, and having the ability to be straightforward with people and be honest, bring it up to them and say, hey, I know we've doing things this way. This is, I've seen an issue here. Let's have a conversation around it. Let's fix these things, because that is very important to the success of any business. And it's also going to be very important to the success of you personally in your career. I think that it's also, it's pretty self-evident, but people who are honest are typically, they might suffer negative consequences in an immediate future, because if there's somebody else who's trying to spread lies. Like I've heard some examples from some of my mentors about working at more corporate structured type of places where there tends to be a number of dishonest people who are trying to manipulate things in advance artificially. But if you can remain transparent and honest and clear throughout that whole time, you will you'll as a result come out ahead in the end, right? Whether it's you have to leave the organization, yeah, so what? That might be actually good for you, because why would you want to be around those type of people? We'll talk about in another episode. We'll talk about surrounding yourself with the right type of people. But again, just really want to drive home that point that it is so important to be very transparent throughout your life. I credit not all of my success, but most of my success of getting to where I am in life, because when I don't know something in a sales call or something, I'm just so straight up. I'm like, I actually don't know. I don't try to answer it. I just tell them like it is, but I also pair that with the ability and willingness to go and figure it out. I'll say, I don't know, but I will figure that out for you. I have the right people to talk to, and I'll figure that out. That's how I succeeded in insurance. Like I was an 18-year-old kid who literally just started insurance. I'm supposed to be a financial expert, advising people on their finances, but I didn't know everything. I knew a lot, but I just had to oftentimes say, yeah, I'm sorry. If there's something, there's going to be things I don't know, but I have a boss who's super knowledgeable, and we will do the best job for you. And just having that, it really resonates, because people can read dishonesty. They can just taste it on your breath. Like they can smell it on you from a mile away. And the reason I wanted to, again, dedicate a whole episode to this was it's so important, and it's really helped me personally get to where I am.
Absolutely. And I think it's like I kind of touched on it earlier, but I think you have to look at the alternative. So what happens and who do you become when you're dishonest? Because if we're tying this all in together, that person that you created in your mind, the future you, who you want to be, you're not going to get there by being dishonest. You're not going to get there by lying. And what you're going to get actually is you're going to end up being the kind of the antithesis. You're going to end up being the opposite of who you want to be if you're dishonest, because you're never going to give yourself the opportunity to get where you want to be to give that other person, the future person, the right, your ideal person, the chance to succeed, because you're always going to be cutting his legs out from underneath him with your lies. And honestly, if you want to go into karma, it's just going to bleed back. Like there is not a time when being dishonest ever pays off. Like it might in the very short term, like we said, because you'll have that short-term discomfort when you're being honest. But in the long term, if you're lying and you're making up excuses, lies, all these things, it's going to come back, and the way it works is it just accrues. It just grows. It expounds exponentially, and it will end up being a painful reckoning. Let's just put it that way, like in any situation.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just very, very important to have that integrity, because it all comes down to it, especially in this day of social media. It's just very difficult. Like who you are is going to show through at some point. So you might as well be honest and get to be that good person. And I think that what you said, I just wanted to finish up with this, is if you're not honest, you're not going to achieve your goals, because it's the same thing as, if you are, I like that scene from Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Have you seen that? When they're driving the wrong way, right? They're driving on the wrong side of the road. And it's just like that. If you are on the wrong side of the road, going the wrong way, and you are trying to tell yourself that you are being honest with yourself, you're headed in the wrong direction. Like, you're not going to get where you need to be. If you have these goals that you've set and you've decided, I'm going to be in charge of this life that I have, my chance, these are my goals. If you're not honest with what are the negative things and cutting those things out, you're not going to achieve those. So I guess to wrap it up there, straightforward, be honest, right? It's a short episode, but I appreciate you guys visiting with us today. And we will be back next time to discuss who you choose to surround yourself with, the company you choose. So we hope to see you next time. Thanks for joining.